Are you ready to learn? Because my super experienced guests are ready to share some really valuable information. Make sure and listen all the way to the end to get help and support. So let's start with the best audio experience.
10 years ago, when I invested on online project, I usually expect to get $2 back after investing $1. Today, it's hard. It's hard because of competition, because of many other projects online. And today, marketers need to consider a new metric. It's called customer lifetime value. When you invest $1, and you need to sell your customers many times, your customer can bring more friends, other clients, so you can get your $2 back or probably more. So I'm so excited to discuss this topic with Daniel McCarthy. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a big pleasure. I want to learn more about that. I know it's important to consider lifetime value. Before we start, just tell more about yourself, experience, background, and why you decided to share with us about this topic.
Yes, I'm an assistant professor of marketing at Emory University. I basically spend most of my time thinking about topics like customer lifetime value, predicting what customers will do in the future, and how it rolls up to help us understand how well companies are doing as a whole. So it's kind of been top of mind from a research perspective. I teach a course called Customer Lifetime Valuation. Literally, the course is called CLV. So we kind of go through all the nuts and bolts of moving from transactional data to predicting what customers will do, how we can think about defining some of these measures properly, and all of those other details that you really need to think about to actually get a correct customer lifetime value, such as what costs do you include? How do we think about attribution and things like that? So that's the teaching cap. And then the third cap is as an entrepreneur. So I've co-founded a couple businesses. The first business was called Zodiac. Zodiac was a predictive analytics software as a service MarTech firm. And we basically work with companies, ingested all their transactional CRM data, ran a series of predictive models to predict what the customers will purchase in the future, use that to infer customer lifetime value, the probability they're going to come back over the next 6, 12, 24 months, what have you, and then use that sort of information to help the marketers at those firms understand where they should be spending their marketing dollars. So the same sort of problems that you were just describing a moment ago. We grew it, sold it to Nike in March of 2018, and then this is Pete Fader and myself. Pete Fader is a Wharton marketing professor who was my advisor while I was there. And we took some of the proceeds to co-found a second company called Theta, which uses very similar predictive models for customer behavior, but now we're using it to a large extent for more financial outcomes. So helping to understand the overall valuation of companies, helping to understand, is this company's unit economics healthy or not? And we'll kind of use that same sort of modeling analysis to really help understand that. So so that company's called Theta. We've now kind of moved back into the marketing Zodiac type use cases as well. So it's anyone who's kind of interested in exploring that, whether you're an investor or working within the marketing department or in some other department of the company. I think that we could definitely we'd love to speak with you.
Love your experience. Awesome. Okay, let's start from the basic question that I have in my mind. I found online that many businesses have no documented content strategy. So they usually use generic methods, replicate their competitors, don't measure this customer lifetime value. Can you tell how to create this strategy, marketing strategy for paid marketing or SEO or any other channel, considering lifetime value? Can you tell more about that?
Well, I think what you can do is, to the extent that the channel that your customers came from, if you did have an accurate model for customer lifetime value, then you could be able to compare the cost that you had, the amount of money that you spent to acquire the customer through that channel, to how much you made from that customer after they were acquired. So we call the first thing customer acquisition cost. And then the second thing is post-acquisition value, just the value of that customer after you brought them in the door. And then the idea would be you want to find the channels that are bringing in the best customers. And so, you can kind of use that framework to understand what is my marketing return on investment. And then through that, and typically, we would recommend doing that in conjunction with A/B testing, experimenting. But that can really help you understand, what channels are making you the most money. And then, in the next period, just try to kind of put more of your budget in those better performing channels.
Yeah, I agree with that. Except one thing, you need to understand the channel. For example, if I have some clients on Instagram, but I'm so bad with that, for me it's hard to compete my skills about Instagram with my wife, because she can spend the whole day, on Instagram to check out feed. I can't. For me, it's boring. It's better to spend time on LinkedIn. So I think it's important to understand the channel or have resources. You can delegate the task to someone who is familiar with a specific channel, but it's better to know how to grow on specific channel, because it's not only about covering channel. It's more about to understand the audience on specific channel, to create content that are related to specific channel. For example, on Facebook, people have no buying mood. They're not ready to buy. So you can change this buying mood by sharing value, helping them, supporting them. And when they are ready, so you can lead them in the top funnel to sell. Can you tell about the metric, how to calculate, calculation, customer lifetime value? Let's imagine I'm using paid marketing, Google Ads, and how to calculate what kind of value I can get back after investing X amount of money.
Yeah, well, the ability to compute customer lifetime value, after acquisition, hopefully that should be relatively straightforward. As long as you got that customer ID, you can kind of track their purchases over time. And then the hope is that you've got visibility into all of the direct costs that went into generating that revenue. So fulfillment expenses, credit card payment processing, obviously direct labor, direct materials, that sort of a thing. And then the only other kind of open variable is if you had spent additional marketing dollars to generate the repeat orders. But the idea would be, let's take into account all that stuff. That kind of when you get those orders, you're gonna have to be spending that money each time you do so. So you basically kind of get that stream of future contribution profits, and that can give you, what the post-acquisition will be when you account for the time value of money properly. So yes, it's really just kind of a process of comparing that to what you spent up front. To your point, I think some channels may seem like they're underperforming, but it could be because of something that the company is doing suboptimally. Like maybe the Instagram strategy is just no good. And so, so if you had someone like your wife, kind of at the helm, maybe she could do a much better job with it. It can be helpful to look not only at your return on investment, but also to the extent that you have norms for how good those channels can be for your peers. Then if you are underperforming your peers, that can be an indication that you're leaving money on the table. And if you were to bring in someone who, can kind of up your game on the content side or whatever, that you could kind of improve the return on that channel. So yes, absolutely. I think there's this question of like, what is assumed when we compute those numbers? And there's an implicit assumption oftentimes of kind of a continuation of the status quo, that if you were the one who was kind of at the helm, kind of leading content strategy for the portfolio of channels that you market through, that's not going to fundamentally change. But as you'd expect, if you were to bring in someone else, it could be that that the returns change. And so I think that's why it can be really helpful to track all of these numbers over time, that they're not static measures. These are measures that will be dynamic. And in cases like this, if it is something that's observable, that's changing, then it's even easier to kind of incorporate that into your modeling.
Yeah, interesting. You have extended experience by teaching people in university, in different trainings. Can you tell how to transfer the right way educational stuff or data to others? Let me explain why I'm asking about that. According to a few studies, marketers usually recommend a lot to their customers, and only 40% of their recommendations are implemented. Most of them ignore because businesses have no time, resources, or any other excuses, to implement data. Can you tell how to explain the right way that it's important, or to choose priorities, or choose the right data? For example, if you calculate for your customers that we need to use this data, return on investment, many other metrics, but how to explain to the customer that it's important to implement, to consider, and don't ignore?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll often say that to really make this sort of a pivot work, you need buy-in from people higher up than you. And obviously, unless you're the CEO of the company, if you're the CEO of the company, then you can kind of just push it on down. But
they're so busy.
yeah, you need cultural change, and if you don't have buy-in from from the C-suite, then it can be very hard to kind of get something like this going, because there are a few things that you need to do to really make it work. You need the right data, you need the right measures, and then you need the right predictive models, and then you need the ability to take action on the results. And each of those things, it's not like you can kind of wake up one day and say, that's the right way to do it, so I'm just going to kind of snap my finger and make it happen. Typically you need to invest in data acquisition. You need to invest in instrumentation on the other side to take action. And inevitably, there's going to be some period of learning where you're probably not going to be making quite as much money, because you're going to have to be making these investments. So, so there's that question: how do you get the buy-in? And all the stuff that I've been doing on customer-based corporate valuation has been to help get investors keying in on all this. And so we're increasingly seeing the investment community obsessing over CAC, obsessing over, well, why did you miss your subscriber numbers? It's not just about, revenue and profit, but it's about, marketing productivity, how much you spent on ad spend and how many customers you brought in, how often they're repeating, what's happening with my churn rate. And obviously, we kind of elevate it one level further to kind of do it in a principled way. But if you have the investors kind of breathing down the neck of the CEO and the CFO, it's going to force the CEO and the CFO to have to start caring about this stuff. So I think that is one big vector that can help enable change. I think if you're a company that has not been subjected to that yet, you haven't had your investors kind of pushing you around about this stuff, I think that the people within the organization can point to other examples where that has happened, so that hopefully, even if you haven't experienced it yourself, you can still vicariously learn and see the writing is on the wall, that even if it hasn't happened to you yet, it will. So I think that's been a really interesting development over the past couple of years. I mentioned Pete Fader. He's been also kind of spearheading this customer centricity movement. And the idea behind customer centricity is, I think a growing number of companies are realizing that it's kind of table stakes to just have great product and focus on product. You also really need to have a great customer experience, and have something that'll keep people coming back. And that can be more than just product in isolation. And so and it's not just customer lifetime value calculations. It's something that I think is very intuitively appealing. And he's found that, and I've found it as well, as I've started to kind of teach that stuff too. It's the sort of stuff that can kind of get the CEO and the CFO on board. Maybe more so the CEO. I think the CFO can often be a bit more, just purely dollars and cents. But I think there's a couple of different hooks like that can really help just catalyze that sort of cultural transformation that's required to really help get the budget to the marketing department to be able to kind of make some of these changes.
Yeah, awesome, valuable. We have a bunch of comments from Melinda Wells. Probably she spoke on TEDx. I can see it on her avatar. That's great. And I like the last quote: "Marketing to the right customer is significant." Yeah, we have. I know another quote: "If you sell to anyone, you sell to nobody." So it's better to find your customer. And you mentioned about acquiring the right data. Can you tell how to collect the right data? Because it's a big issue with my customers, with many others. They usually use generic data from online studies, tools. They analyze competitors, but competitors might have their strong side, their unique selling proposition. It's quite different. Even two companies can sell the same product. I don't know, let's imagine iPhone. They sell iPhones, but they have different approaches to sell iPhones, probably delivery, any other stuff. It's not only about the price. Can you tell how to collect the right data today, according to your experience?
Yeah, I mean, step one is certainly making sure your transactional data is clean and the match rate is high. So the match rate is the proportion of transactions that you can tie back to specific customer identifiers. So that's one that you better have a nice clean transaction log. So that's really helpful. One thing, companies will often migrate from one system to another. Those system migrations can be very disruptive for the transaction log. So, especially around systems migrations, to the extent that you can be able to kind of tie the transaction logs together, that is so helpful. The next level is really how you can kind of enrich that with other data. And I'm a big first-party data person. I think that third-party data coming from companies like Axiom and Experian, it sounds really nice. It's very sexy, but oftentimes has kind of limited signal. We just have found that it has relatively low explanatory power. So, I'm kind of a big proponent of finding ways to get a lot of good first-party data. CDPs are becoming increasingly popular. There's a number of good ones out there. But again, the idea behind the CDP is, in addition to the transaction data, you've got the service touch points. You've got some of your customers might be calling in. You want to be able to take all of that data and be able to tie it back to specific customers. Another one's profitability data. It's not something that typically is readily available, but to the extent that your purchases have the products that are bought by the customers, then if you know the contribution profitability of those products, then certainly all of that can be done at the transaction level, as opposed to having to do some sort of peanut butter spread contribution margin haircut thing, that oftentimes is what you would otherwise have to do. Fulfillment data, there's another one that oftentimes it may be somewhat disconnected from the transaction log, but ideally you would want to also know, how those costs are linked to specific purchases, so that you can just get a cleaner read on the profit of a transaction. Returns is another. Yeah, I mean, I could kind of keep going on. Returns are not. Oftentimes they're handled in a variety of different ways. Sometimes you don't know the customer that was returning the product. If you do, there are many times where companies won't know the specific purchase that whose products are being returned. That can be extremely important information. Again, for one, it's to get the profitability right at the transaction level, but it's also really useful information when you think about starting to model returns. If you wanted to actually have like a predictive model for returns at the time of purchase, then if you don't have returns data linked to purchase data, you can't really do that very accurately. So I'd say it's really a good CDP, a good data system can help kind of tie all that back together. I guess the final one I would be remiss if I didn't mention is all the stuff that happens before acquisition. So it's not that you don't know anything. I think especially in B2B settings, it tends to be a little bit better because they may have come to your website, they may have submitted an information request. At some point they become a marketing qualified lead. At some point they graduate to being a sales qualified lead. You may have had conversations. Those conversations might have been with specific employees. You want to know, which were the employees who touched that customer. And then in theory, you can start to think about attribution. Like maybe some of your employees are better at bringing in better customers. Maybe some of your employees are more skilled at converting prospects to adopt. So again, just being able to kind of link that back to specific customers is just going to be tremendously valuable.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, let's talk about another aspect. Once I spoke with an expert in data collecting, and she mentioned to me that when you get more data than you need, it hurts. So it's like over data, and a few times I highlighted some points on LinkedIn that overlearning hurts. So I'm not against overlearning, but I think people often overlearn without doing something. For example, if you learn, you can forget for a few days about new skills. I can forget for a few hours, anything. Because I know that when you learn and implement, you can analyze what actually works for you. You can find through experience, and it's the way to learn as well, because learning through experience is better than just to read a lot of books and do nothing. I think in data collecting, we forget about intuition. I remember one interesting meeting with Jeff Bezos. I don't remember exactly who shared this meeting, but Jeff Bezos got a lot of data about a new product, and he replied, guys, nobody knows what actually works. We need to try, we need to test, we need to adapt, we need to launch a raw product, then we can analyze and improve it. It's like intuition, it's not about data. Can you tell about finding the balance between collecting data, not over collecting, and intuition? Because sometimes you can feel, you can understand the customers, you can feel them by heart, not by logic. So your insights about that?
Yeah, I think intuition can help inform the experiments to run. I think without this data, oftentimes you're flying blind. Like you wouldn't be able to run the experiment because you wouldn't have the X variables to go into the model, But I absolutely agree. I think it also dovetails with this broader. It's both a pro and a con. That CLV is a high level measure, and I think sometimes the high level nature of the measure makes it hard for some marketers to know exactly what to do with it. So yeah. So for me, I think there's that, again, just to kind of keep throwing out the quotes. I think it was Einstein who said a problem well specified is a problem half solved. And I think overlearning is what it can do is it can lead to less specification because you're focusing on other things as opposed to like very specifically trying to answer specific questions. So certainly I agree with that sentiment. In some sense, I think, I tend to just, one thing that I'm laser focused on is getting an accurate CLV. I think if you don't have a really good, clean read on the value of your customers, then it's just very hard to steer your company in the right direction. So a lot of those data sources I mentioned, we immediately have this use case, like I know exactly what I'm going to do with it, because we can just kind of bake it into a more refined estimate of transaction level profitability, which will lead to more accurate estimates of lifetime value. I'm a big experimenter. I think that experimentation is helpful, and an experimentation platform or something that can allow you to run cheap randomized experiments can be really valuable in terms of allowing you to understand the causal effect of certain actions that you might be considering on customers. But yeah, it goes back to that point that to be able to run the experiment, you need the requisite data and you need the ability to act on that thing. And without those two things, you really can't do a whole lot with it, So yes, I'm kind of a big advocate of running those experiments and then looking at the impact that those things have on lifetime value. I think that in general is relatively simple. It's not that complicated, and it's directly telling you, this is the return on investment of that action. So I think that it's a nice, clean measure, hopefully not too prone to over-analysis.
Yeah, got it. Valuable. We have the question from Melinda. Can you take a little bit about customer activation? How do we hook the customer to buy? So can you provide insights about that?
Yeah, I mean, moving someone from prospect to customer is, that's, I teach a whole lecture on customer acquisition strategies. And so one way that I'll conceptualize it is through a funnel. I'm a big fan of layer cakes, where the highest level of the layer is the total applicable market, that you kind of have the total number of people who could potentially adopt. And then you kind of successively kind of work your way down to the people who are aware, are interested in you, have some intent to purchase, and then eventually end up acquiring. And so I think being able to, first, I think you really need to do proper survey work regularly over time, both about yourself and about your main competitors, to be able to kind of get proxies for, your TAM, your SAM, number aware, et cetera, just to be able to identify where you're weak, and what the choke point is that might be holding back customer adoption. And oftentimes it can be the case that companies are very good at some part. They're good in some part of the funnel, but they're not so good at other parts of the funnel, but they're just not even aware of that. And so they're not acquiring as many customers, but really it's that they had this one specific choke point. And if they really, kind of leaned in on that thing, suddenly they have all these people kind of flowing through the funnel very, very efficiently. So I'm not sure there's a one size fits all answer to the activation strategy that works the best. I think it really is, kind of a byproduct of running that survey work and then saying, where are we weak? And then given that, I think we can get a lot more specific about exactly what sort of actions we can consider to help unclog that part of the pipe.
Yeah, okay, got it. Acquiring a new customer costs 5 times more than retaining old customer. Can you tell about retaining? For example, if I get data that my customer needs more support, but many companies have limited resources, and I personally have this issue, and I found, for example, if I have some issue on LinkedIn, it's hard to achieve support. You need to write email and wait for a few days to get something back, and it's annoying. It's annoying for many customers. I know that companies are trying to use AI tools, but most of the time they reply some generic stuff without real help. So can you tell how to decide these problems if you have limited resources? For example, okay, LinkedIn can hire plus 10,000 more people, but the business model will not be profitable. Yeah, so they can't earn money. But customers need it. They need customer support. They need to get this attention. Can you tell what to do with limited resources, but when you have a lot of customers and you need to provide help to them?
Yeah, it's an important question. I think just kind of like two dimensions to it. I think the first is acknowledging and embracing the fact that some customers are needier than other customers. They just need more, and maybe they're just structurally less profitable. Like they're the people who always call up to customer service and just hog the lines, or they're the ones who, for the shoe company, they're the ones who always get 20 pairs of shoes and then keep one. And return the other 19 and you offer free shipping, and you're just eating it big time on those customers. Others, they're like me. I'm super lazy. I tend to buy at list price. I don't tend to return very much. So I'm probably leaving money on the table, but good for the company, good for the companies that I buy at. So I think, when we quote those figures about, customers being, it's 5 times less costly to retain than to acquire. That 5x figure it's an average of people who are extremely expensive and not expensive at all. And I think one thing that it can motivate then is to try and find ways to limit losses from the super needy, especially if they're not bringing in a whole lot of value at the end of the day. So one thing that some companies have done, for example, is they'll offer the free shipping, but they have in the fine print that if you abuse their return policy, they're not going to offer you free returns. And so that could be one thing that you can do, where you're still able to say, free shipping, free returns, but you're not losing a ton of money on these people who buy the 20 and return 19. And what a lot of work has shown is, I don't know if you're familiar with the Pareto principle. It's basically the 80-20 rule. Well, the 80-20 rule definitely holds for returns. That most of the losses that companies incur on returns are from a very small proportion of people. So I think that's kind of a microcosm of I think what can be done to help limit the losses while still preserving the vast majority of sales volume that might be coming in. I think that's kind of one example. The other thing I would mention is that, again, it kind of goes back to experiments. You can have some customers that are very responsive to customer service. Maybe they're going to be much more prone to staying, because you're offering them that whatever that benefit might be. Whereas others, they might have stayed anyways. I mean, if they're really long-term loyal customers, there's a question: does that mean that you want to dole out a whole bunch of freebies to them, or are they so good that you really don't need to spend money on them? They're just going to kind of keep coming back anyways, and so you don't want to waste your money. And that's exactly where you want to run experiments. I think that it's really hard to say in advance, like, you want to spend a lot of money on the best customers, or you don't want to spend any money on the best customers. Run an experiment and then use that experiment to estimate the return on investment associated with being liberal with them versus not. And a well-designed experiment will give you a valid answer to that question. So I would use that as kind of the guiding principle. And then if you do have a limited budget, if you've got $100 to spend, then this will give you the ability to spend that $100 the most productively.
Yeah, focusing is key. I agree with that. Love it. Okay, Daniel, I have the question about common mistakes. Can you list common mistakes that companies still do, and your any tips how to find much better way by calculating or measuring lifetime value?
Well, one common thing is people will treat customer lifetime value as a trophy measure, and they'll treat it as marketing material, and they'll want it to be big, and they'll want CAC to be small. And so they'll kind of do whatever it takes to kind of make good numbers look good, and you make the CAC numbers look low. Don't cheat yourself. The big loser when you do that is you. I think that, I understand, like we all want to make our figures look good for investors, but the problem is, as soon as you start lying to yourself, there's no way out. So if you actually want this to be useful and to be a proper measure of return on investment, you need to be honest about what are my expenses, what is truly variable, and at least internally, maybe the numbers that you report to the investment community is coming from a different set of books, but you need to have that internal set of books where you're actually looking at these figures for what they should be, not what you aspirationally want them to be for the investment community. So I think that's one. It just shows up time and time again. I'll look at these company disclosures, and it's atrocious, some of the stuff that they put in there. So now there are a lot of people who, they genuinely are trying to kind of do it the right way, but they just, there's just a lot of things that can kind of trip you up. I think one of them is obviously using the wrong predictive model. I think that inevitably it could be just kind of that traditional CLV formula that you learn in marketing 101, where you kind of take your margin while alive times your return, your R divided by 1 minus I plus R. It's your retention rate divided by 1 minus your discount rate plus your retention rate. And that's just a terrible formula. If you actually look at how well that model predicts what your customers are going to do, it predicts terribly. So I think the second thing for people who do genuinely want to get it right, treat customer lifetime value as what it is, that it is a sparse prediction problem, where you're trying to get, ideally what you're trying to get is individual level estimate of the net present value of a customer. And to the extent that you're doing a prediction, you want to see how well you predict. And so there's a whole suite of validations that we'll always do with prediction problems that sometimes are not done with CLV. So I think that's kind of another big one. I could spend 5 hours about the pitfalls that people go through and when kind of doing these CLV calculations. But I think that those were two of the ones that kind of immediately come to mind.
Nice. I have the question about, can you tell, let's imagine you started from scratch without any experience, knowledge, skills. What will you do today to learn more about customer lifetime value?
Well, I'm going to this will be somewhat self-promotional, but again, I teach a course on customer lifetime value. So certainly, to the extent that I can be helpful in that journey, I'd love to be. So if you wanted to sign up for the class or ask for materials, I'd be more than happy to share. I think there's other material that's quite accessible that I'd be happy to recommend. I'm not sure I can just kind of rattle them off right now, but certainly there's kind of a list of resources that when people email me saying they want to learn more about this stuff, I've got a set of resources that I'll send over to them. So so virtually all of it's free. There's no cost associated with it, and I'd be more than happy to share that. I do think that, and again, it's kind of unfortunate, but I do feel that a lot of what's out there is of questionable quality. So I think that there's kind of this. I think it's Hammurabi's code that that the first rule is to do no harm, and so I'm a little hesitant to recommend courses. There's not a whole lot of courses that are out there that really do it right. So yes, I think case by case basis, but happy to help kind of think through any other courses that those people may be considering. But I think a lot of it is not great. So yes, I kind of start there, and then I think to some degree it also is kind of a function of the focus of the person. Like, are they kind of coming at it more from a marketing perspective? Are they coming at more? I'm a potential investor who's looking at CLV, as kind of a diagnostic measure of the health of the companies I may invest in. The sort of resources that could be most useful for the one group might be different from the others, because the marketers are they're going to get a lot more value from the more tactical, how do we experiment, how do we think about attribution and things like that. Whereas the investors, they may be more interested in, let's really nail down like the cost accounting. How can this really help us inform a view as to what path to profitability is. And so inevitably there's a lot that kind of overlaps between those two ways of looking at the world. But there's kind of enough non-overlappingness that I think it may also just be kind of person specific.
Nice. By the way, you can share your course on private chat. I'll share with in the podcast episode. Guys, you can find the link to the course. I highly recommend to learn more about that, because it's very important today to calculate this data, to know customer lifetime value, because digital marketing is huge. We have a lot of competitors, 1.8 billion websites online that want to get traffic, want to get sales. So you need to compete with them. It's better to create the right strategy, to calculate this data, to know your customer lifetime value. I love this metric. I highly recommend it. Daniel, tell our audience the best way how to reach out to you, to learn more about you, follow you.
Yeah, so I've got, and maybe I'll put this so the private chat, then everyone can
Yeah.
see what's in there.
Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
so
yeah, I'll share. Yeah, it's just this feature. Yeah. So right
yeah,
now,
so I'd say
everyone.
you can follow me on Twitter at @D_MCCAR. I talk about this stuff a lot there. LinkedIn is, I know you mentioned liking LinkedIn a lot. I also like LinkedIn a lot. So I'll post a lot there as well. So yeah, at least once every couple of days or so. So so I just put a link into my LinkedIn. If you're interested in other resources, the company that I co-founded, Theta, we have a number of really great kind of deep dives into public companies. And so if you're looking for additional resources, the blog at our website is just absolutely great. We have I'd say that most recent analysis that we did was of Warby Parker, and we've been following them very closely.
Nice.
And then hopefully today we'll have our new analysis of Wayfair. So they just reported Q3 earnings last week, and we've done a really deep dive into them that we're going to be sharing pretty soon. So yes, obviously, I'll probably be talking about that on my LinkedIn and Twitter, but yeah, might as well get it straight from the source.
Nice. Guys, you can find the link to Twitter and LinkedIn in the description below. To Daniel, follow him. You can see a lot of valuable insights. You can learn more about that. Thanks for taking part, for listening, for watching us. Daniel, it's a big pleasure to get you on my show, to learn from you. I love all your insights. So welcome back anytime to share more valuable insights, because you're super active with that, to share value, to help and support others. I love it. I love learning from the best. Okay, guys, love you. See you.